Welcome back to another episode of the Dear Fathers podcast. I'm your host, Jesse Alex, also the co-founder here at Dear Fathers, which y'all know is the premier media platform dedicated to telling stories of Black fathers while providing resources for Black men. I'm excited about another impactful conversation that we'll have today with an amazing guest. I'd like to welcome Grammy-nominated singer, former American Idol winner, and amazing father, Ruben Studdard. Welcome to the Dear Fathers podcast, man. How you feeling today?
I'm blessed, brother. Thank you for having me on the Dear Fathers podcast. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem, man. Like, we are always excited, man, to talk to guys like yourself. Our podcast is meant to, unpack who you are as a Black man, who you are as a father. So, want to get it right into, like, who was Ruben Studdard before the fame, before American Idol? Like, what was your upbringing like, and what was that foundation like for you growing up?
I was raised, I was, first of all, I was born in Frankfurt, Germany. My father was in the military at the point of my birth. And shortly thereafter, my father, I think, was discharged. And maybe like 6 or 7 months after, he had served like 5 or 6 years, and his time was up. And so we moved back to my mother and father's hometown, which is Birmingham, Alabama. I was raised there. Raised around a lot of love. For the vast majority of my life, I lived in very close proximity to my father's father, my grandfather, who lived directly across the street from me. I lived about 10 minutes away, if that, maybe I'd say 5 minutes away from my great grandfather, my mother's grandfather, who died when I was in second or third grade. I was always connected very closely to my family on both sides. They were both from the western side of Birmingham, Alabama. So most of my aunts, uncles, cousins, everybody lived at max 10 minutes away from each other at the time of me growing up. So when I was a kid, like I say, we lived across the street from my granddad. I could walk 2 minutes and be to my dad's sister's house. I could, when I got of age, I could ride my bike to my grandmother's house. Like, it was just, everybody was very close. And not only my immediate family, but my extended family, which is from the two churches that I was raised in. My mother's home church is where I primarily went, but also my father's church. My mother's church was Rising Star Missionary Baptist Church, and my father's church was Mount Pilgrim Missionary Baptist Church. And so, both of those church families were like an extended part of who I am. So a lot of the great leadership, great male mentors I had, the people I saw being fathers, were not just the men in my family, but also the men that I saw in my extended community.
Yeah, that's beautiful, man. I love to hear stories like that wherein you're just close knit with your family, and it's crazy like how you saying like you're walking distance from certain people. And I grew up in a small city of St. Louis, Missouri, so I'm 10 to 15 minutes from all my family members as well growing up, so that's always cool. I love to hear that from you. But from a fatherhood perspective, your dad being in the military, right? Like, what was that upbringing like? Was he really tough on you? Like, how was that?
I will say that I wouldn't have known my dad was in the military unless uh, I didn't meet his military friends. Like, that's a very cool story about uh, my mom and her college roommate were very close. I think my mom's college roommate ended up marrying a guy that was in the army, right? Shortly after they graduated, like a month after graduation, she got married, moved away. My dad and my mom got married, I think maybe 2 years after my mom graduated from A&M. And when they moved to Germany, her roommate was there with like, and also one of the our close family friend who lived on the same street as my grandmother was stationed in the same place as my mom. So like they had like all these weird connections to Birmingham, even though they were like thousands of miles away from home. Like people were right there with them. Yeah,
No.
but you asked, was my father strict? He was stern.
Mm.
You know what I mean? Like we didn't listen. there was no rod sparing going on around my house, but it was always done with love. Like I would have to say I never really got disciplined, and now looking back, unless I deserved it. Like I really, had to be out of character. You know what I mean? To like,
Mhm.
get my daddy to get down because he was always so cool. Like, it's like, man, like, come on, I already gave you one shot, bro. Like,
Yeah.
you done got me
Wow.
to the point where I got to get you. Or this is the one thing, and I know is, my kids are so young now that, I'm not used to that, but I already know that this is probably gonna be like if my mom was getting to my dad a lot about me, that's when my dad was like, all right, come on, I gotta get you.
Right. I got you, man. That's cool to hear. Now, when did you know that you wanted to start singing? Like, were you as a kid like singing for all your family members, going house to house, like, let me sing for you? Like, what was that like?
Church, bro.
Hmm.
It really was church. And my very first solo, they tell me because I don't remember or recall it, but they said I sang a solo uh, at a church when I was in preschool. And from my understanding, I never stopped like singing in front. Like people always, even though I used to have, I was very uneasy about performing when I was young. Like it wasn't something that I just like. People sometimes think, well, were you always like the one that wanted to jump in front? No, they had to ask me. But after a while, it just became the thing that I did. I think when I got really comfortable with being at the microphone was around 8 or 9.
Okay.
And when the nerves weren't an issue for me, then I could just get up and be like,
Right. And 8 or 9 is still young, right? That's still early. So for you to gain that confidence at 8 or 9, that's really cool. And I want to, just kind of fast forward to 2003, winning American Idol. Take us back to that moment and how that felt for you and what that also did for you and your family.
it was, and I hate to get real churchy, but it was the culmination of a lot of prayer, a lot of dreaming, a lot of having a vision of yourself doing something. And it I always seem to like get, before American Idol, I felt like I would always get to the point like right before I could do something big. You know what I mean? Like I would send a demo tape to somebody and I would get those letters back and then never hear anything back. Or I would, get a chance to go sing for like producer and it was just like it never happened. But American Idol, man, is like every single thing just it fell into place. Like it was absolutely God sent because I personally didn't want to audition for the show. I was singing. I was in Birmingham singing around with everybody. I had a decent job, and I was just like content with being the guy that everybody in Birmingham called. Like, we gonna get Ruben's band to come do X, Y, Z. Like they gonna, And we were doing a lot of corporate gigs. Like we were really like setting ourselves up to be like the best corporate band in the city, and so we were making what we thought was a lot of money. Like if the five of us could do a gig and make 1,500, like we were like, oh man, like what just, you know what I mean? Like what just happened, So we were getting to the place where we were doing that consistently. And then American Idol happened.
No, that's amazing, man. I love to hear stories like that because you alluded to something where it's like, us or the people on the outside, we don't always see kind of those hurdles and those ebbs and flows of like what it takes to get to that point of being successful. And as you know, there's a lot of things that happen for you to get to where you are. And from, winning in '03 to '04, having your album come out, the hit song, Sorry 2004, to now it being 2024, it's a 20-year anniversary for you. I'm curious to know what you feel like, how, what your growth has been as an artist from back then to now.
I am more comfortable in in the reality of who I am as a performer. When I first got in the industry, and I think there's a lot of based upon the times in which I grew up, right? So, I grew up in the 80s and 90s, and and hip hop and R&B mixture was a very huge thing, right? And so I don't know how old you are, brother, but
I'm
R,
35 years old.
all right, well, I'm 45. So
Mhm. Yeah.
I'll be 46 on my birthday. So when that hip hop and R&B fusion was a big thing for me in middle school and high school, where, when Mary J. Blige and all these people were coming out. And in my mind, that was the kind of artist I wanted to be. But what happens is um, you get, because of your particular talent, uh, there are things that get placed on you that you don't even know you want to do, right? And I kind of, in the beginning of my career, I kind of like, because people always, even before when I was doing weddings with my band, people like, man, you sound so much like Luther and Gerald Levert. No, I'm like, man, where you check at? Like, but that's what I had been grooming myself unconsciously to do what I'm doing now. I feel like I'm falling in the footsteps of so many great performers. Like, when you look at people like Nat King Cole and, Luther Vandross, again, I say, you look at people like Frank Sinatra, none of these people were known for their original material, right? Their their biggest breakthroughs was the way that they sang songs. Like, it didn't matter what the song was, it was like, oh, Frank Sinatra just sang My Funny Valentine. It's Frank Sinatra's song. Luther Vandross just sang A House Is Not a Home. It's Luther, even though people don't know, that's not an original Luther Vandross song. It's not. But to us, to people in the general public, we think it's his song, but it's not. And so because of my education, because of the things that I learned about music, I became a song stylist unconsciously. Like, I could just, take anybody's song and make it a Ruben Studdard song. And so I'm really thankful for the steps to my maturation as a performer. Like, I would have, when I was spending countless hours in the music building at Alabama A&M University going over um, scores for concerts that we were doing, I never thought that I was going to be recording with like the Los Angeles Symphony with David Foster and all these people. I didn't like you. Who can see that? You know what I mean? Like, I thought I was just like in school learning. But when I'm that day when that recording session happened, I'm working with Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis, and they're like, "Can you read music?" I'm like, yeah. Okay, let's try this song right here. And we did it, and it was so beautiful. But it's because of all those building blocks to where I was, that I was able to have a lot of different experiences outside of the norm for most R&B and soul singers.
Yeah, that's beautiful, man. And like, you kind of speak to a lot in terms of just kind of that process preparing you for the moment or what's going to happen in the future. And I have conversations with a lot of my friends, family members, et cetera, about like, being a creative and kind of the ebbs and flows of the process. But we wouldn't be here with Dear Fathers today if it wasn't for the things that I've experienced in the past. And I'm curious for you, just along that journey, were there any moments where you questioned the process or you had moments where you wanted to give up? And if so, how did you kind of overcome those things to get to a point where you're like, this is what I'm supposed to be doing?
I think there was one moment after American Idol, and it's not directly after the show. I'm like 3 albums in now. Like, so this is like uh Change Me, when the Change Me album came out, and there were issues with um I think like distribution or something that had nothing to do with me. This is like uh, beyond my pay grade, right? Like, I got like my song was number one. Um, the second single on the album was like number two. It was like everything was going the way it was supposed to. And then there was a dispute with two companies with something that had nothing to do with me. And so like at some point in that process, we're moving and all my records get pulled off the shelf based upon a disagreement. And it's not just mine, it's all of the Sony RCA artists, like everybody, like there was a disagreement with these stores. And so it like completely stopped where we were going, trying to make it like have my second million seller album, and then I was like, man, like, why am I doing this when like, I can't control if these people get along with each other, it affects me, right? You know what I mean? And so a lot of times, and a lot of people, we aren't as consumers really privy to the inside information that goes on. We like I remember one comment during that time, or after that was like, "Where's Ruben Studdard?" And I'm like, I'm right here singing my songs, but there might have been like because at one point there was a dispute between American Idol and their parent company that was doing music. So like you can't force things to happen when you're in the sphere of these big companies. But God is good, you know, and despite all the things that are going around you, I was still blessed. Like I never had an opportunity. I just opportunity to see the difference. I just would hear it all the time. And so for, and it was just another lesson in the most important thing I've learned in life is to just continue moving forward.
Yeah, you got to control what you can control, right? Like you say, those things were outside of your control. You were still singing, you were still honing in on your craft. So I commend you for, continuing to do that and continuing to strive for it. And you speak to the music side of things. I'm curious to know also too, over the course of time, being a fairly new dad, you have a son who's 3 years old, you just welcome in a baby girl. Congrats on that. What things have you learned over the course of time that's prepared you to be the husband and the father that you are today?
Patience is the most important thing. Like, we expect our children, and I know this because this is just how we are. And I don't know if it's in the Southern community, like they expect children to perform like adults or act like adults. You know what I mean? Like you expect somebody that has all this energy to like sit still for an hour when they just can't do it. You know what I mean? Like, and so I've learned to be, Olivier, my son in particular, has taught me to be more patient. He's taught me the joy of unconditional love because he really like no even when you like would discipline him, he still comes with like a hug. You know what I mean? And as we get adults, we forget how it feels to be that person. And so, and I watch him like, because, he's a baby. He's still, he's about to be 4 this year. So he's still learning. And now he wants to hold the little baby. And so we're like trying to like, let him know, like, you can't hold her this way. And, so it's interesting to watch, my son grow into a young person.
Mhm.
It's actually been like a really fun process, especially like seeing how much like myself and my wife he is in certain areas. Like when it comes to music, he is like tapped in. When it comes to like being meticulous, like he wants something a particular way, that's my wife. I could care less how the cover is on the bed. Like he's like, no, Dad, I want it right here. You know what I mean? And I'm like, where'd you get that from? That's his mom. So
No, I love that, man. It's kind of, what I imagine it being is like you're watching your inner child as you're raising him and raising your daughter. And I want to speak to, you being a fairly new dad. You mentioned being 45. So if your son's about to be 4, you had your first kid in your early 40s. So what was that like for you? Was there ever a point like in your mid to late 30s going into your 40s where you thought fatherhood may not be for you? Did you always want kids? Like, kind of take us through that journey in terms of, being a new father in your early 40s.
I always wanted kids. I just think that, I was about the business of building Ruben. And, once I felt like, and, we're never ultimately where we want to go, but I feel like I'm as established as I can be now where I can like really be a great dad. You know what I mean? And, I don't, I, I do a lot of travel. I do a lot of travel for my work, but I can control when and where I go and how I move with my family. If I was doing this in like right after American Idol, I wouldn't have been able to control that. I wouldn't have been able to tell anybody at 19 management, yo, I need to take my wife and my kids with me everywhere. They wouldn't have been for it. And now, like everybody is, very accommodating with me and my family. And it's just been a joy to, I got an opportunity to uh, take my son to New York with me when I did, I think it was a Tamron Hall show. And just to watch him um, be so, into what's going on behind the scenes and just having such a good time for me, that was like the best thing in the world for me, even though he probably won't remember it when he gets to be 10 or 11, but I will. So, um,
Yeah, that's beautiful, man. And I asked that too as well because, I'm like I mentioned, 35 years old. I don't actually have any children yet. I started this platform, this podcast centered around me growing up without my father and the impact that it had on me. And for so long, kind of being, I would say, maybe scared to have children just because, you passed out things to your kids and things like that. Basically, being in the business of myself, wanting to be in the right place. So what you're saying, that's advice for me. So I appreciate you for sharing that. And, going into just thinking about just legacy and the things that you are building for your family, you made a decision years ago to like improve your health.
mhm.
How would you say that's impacted your ability to be or the quality of being a good father to show up for your kids, but also taking care of your health along your journey as well?
The thing that's so funny is when you're young, and I was at my largest when I was young. I was 25 when I was a big guy. And because I was so young, I don't think my body ever like let me know, like, yo, like I felt perfectly fine. And it wasn't until maybe 3 or 4 years after American Idol where my schedule was just so like nonstop, 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 like just on the road, not being able to have healthy food options, like not being able to like, you're picking up fast things because you're doing 60 shows in a year, so it's just a lot of going and not really caring about what you're putting in your person, um, it impacts you in a negative way. And so for me, it really is about improving the quality of life at a later age. You know what I mean? Like I want to still be able to enjoy my children and not have their youth be burdensome to me.
Mhm.
I don't want to, like, the other day, Olivier and I were outside playing soccer. I would not want to be able to do that with him because of the amount of joy I saw that it brought to him. So like for me, like that's the most important thing, like having to be able to have those experiences with him and to be here, to enjoy his life and um, baby Henry's life to the fullest.
Yeah, that's what I'm always concerned about, man. Having kids and at an older age, and then I gotta chase them around, and my knee give out or something, man. So health is definitely important because, like you said, in the early 20s, man, eating fast food, staying up late at night, waking up early in the morning, you don't really feel none of that. But like into your 30s, you like, oh man, this don't feel right, for your body. So being that you made that change, that conscious decision to better your health, that's amazing, man, because it's not only gonna help you, but it's gonna be impactful for your kids as well. And you mentioned, your son and then just having a daughter. I'm curious, like, for you, like, do you foresee any differences in how you plan to or how you're raising your son versus how you plan to raise your daughter? What would that look like for you?
I don't know what a difference would be. I'm sure there were going to be very different conversations to be had um, because I want my daughter to feel loved, honored, and respected her whole life so that she doesn't need to go seeking that from the wrong type of gentleman. I want my son to feel validated, protected, and secure so that he can go out and make sure that he knows that he always has an advocate. You know, a lot of times, and this is something that I faced as a young Black man in public school systems. You need people that will take your word for things.
Mhm.
Okay. And I want him to always know that his father and mother will always have his side when he's right.
Yeah. Mhm.
And we'll be there when he's wrong, but we'll always have his back when he's right. And that is um, something that's very important to me because, as you know, a lot of times as African American males, we don't get the benefit of the doubt. So I just want to make sure that I'm letting them know that I'm present, I'm here, no matter where daddy is in the world. I'm only a phone call away. If I'm on the road, you can always get in touch with me. I want them to know I'm accessible. I'm not absent from their life in any kind of way.
Right. No, I love to hear that, man, because, as children, they all need safe spaces. So obviously the first form of a safe space should be, your parents and things of that nature. So being that you are creating and plan to continue to create those safe spaces for your daughter and your son, that's beautiful. And you also alluded to, right, being a Black man. For
Mhm.
you, who's Ruben Studdard's safe space? Like, where do you go for a safe space for yourself? Who do you talk to? Who can you be vulnerable with? Just what's that safe space look like for you as a artist and a parent?
As a child, that safe space was my older brother.
Right.
My brother was even though we grew up in two separate households, he was my confidant. I could, talk to him about anything. Like, it just so happens that he was 4 years my senior. So, whenever I was coming into something, he had just graduated from it. You understand what I'm saying? So, like, when I was coming into middle school, he had just left. When I was coming into high school, he was going to college. You know what I mean? So all the things that a big brother could teach, he taught. And I hope that Olivier is that same way for his sister. Like the things that he sees, he'll share with her, and be that protector that my brother was for me as a young person. As an adult, of course, there are people that work with you. Of course, your parents, but that goes without saying. My mother and father are definitely a safe space for me. But in my work career, my road manager has been like a big brother, i.e., father figure to me. Um, and just being able to um, sharpen my sword with him just because he's been in the business so much, so long. And all the people I try to emulate, he worked with. He worked with Luther. He worked with Miss Patty. He's worked with so many greats, and and he sees that in me. So it's
Right.
been really great to have him around. And then I have some really great friends, man. Like I feel like when I was young, my dad used to always say this to me: "Stop calling everybody your friend. Everybody ain't your friend. Like you be lucky in life to have three good friends, And I have a lot of great friends in my life, but as I felt like um, my childhood, I have like one best friend from like when we were like 3 years old. We're still homies now.
Yeah.
Uh, and then I have a friend that we were friends in high school and we're still friends now. And then I have uh, a friend that I'm friends with from college and we're still like homies. And all of us like still kind of hang out together. So it's great to have also, and they're also great fathers as well. You know what I mean? Like, and so it's great to have men in your life that have like interest, and that are heading in positive directions. When I am at my Ruben Studdard music camp, I particularly talk to the young men about the company that they keep, and that's hard you know to tell young people like, yo, like you really have to understand how important that is. Like the people that might seem lame to you are really the ones that's gonna be like that dude when y'all are adults. You know what I mean? And so I try to encourage young men to like have positive young male friends, like people that are doing things. Like you ain't got to be square just because you
Right.
know, singing in the choir. Like I did it. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? I was in the band. I did everything. I mean, I have friends from all over, and it's, it only helped make me a more well-rounded person.
For sure, man. I think that's definitely important to implement. But like you said, sometimes with, kind of trying to preach that or teach that to kids, it goes in one ear and out the other, but it's going to be beneficial for them in the long run. And, I love that you speak, about your brother kind of being that safe space for you. If I'm not mistaken, did he pass away not too long ago?
Yeah, yeah.
I'm sorry to hear that. And you named your son, or you gave your son your brother's middle name. Like, tell us about that and why you wanted to do that to kind of, continue on that legacy.
So like this is a funny family story. Like I didn't know my brother's name was Kevin until we were like 6. You know what I mean? Like I always called him by his middle name. It's like everybody called him Dedrick because my dad, he's the second. He's Kevin Dedrick Studdard the second. And so they didn't want to call him Kevin, they called him Dedrick, right? So I didn't know, like it never equated to me that my dad and him had the same name, right? Um, until I, of course, got old enough to understand, junior, senior, that kind of situation. But when my brother passed away, um, and I found out that I was having a child. I was like, man, a way to keep my brother with me is to use the name that I called him. I called and everybody else called my brother Kevin, but I called him Dedrick because that was his middle name. So it's just like with me. My first name is Ruben, but my whole family calls me Chris. So
It's funny. I think that's just like a black community thing where it's like your name could be one thing, your whole entire family is just calling you something else. So
yeah.
that's cool to hear, though. And I'm glad you decided to continue that legacy on through your son, being that your brother was, so important in your life. And I wonder for you, just like, what does legacy mean for you now and being, at this point of your career and the things that you're doing and the things that you're tying yourself into while also having 2 kids? Like, describe what legacy means to you, to Ruben Studdard at this, area of your life.
Well, a lot of people, um, I think they equate legacy with finances or funds or things of that nature. That is really, really important to give your family a sound foundation, right? Something that can be a security blanket for them in case things happen for them. But I think the biggest legacy is I'll give you my grandfather for example. Um, my grandfather lived to be 102, 101 years old, right? And it didn't even equate to me that my grandfather was in his late 60s, early 70s when I was a kid. Like that never, because he was so active, so, all over the place. But the one thing that everybody always said about Hiawatha Edward Studdard was that he was a great man. If his word was his bond, like, and this is not just from my uncles and aunts, this is from everybody I talked to that knew my grandfather. Like nobody ever was like, your granddaddy gave me 20,000, your granddaddy, like everybody would be like, man, your granddaddy taught me how to be a good man. Like I met your granddaddy at the post office when he was, working there, and he taught, like, and I'm like, those are the things I want to be the legacy for my son and my daughter. Like I want people to open doors for them because of the type of person I was. You know what I mean? Like that's the kind of legacy I want to have for them. Like give them an opportunity to show you that they have talent based upon your relationship with me. Like I can't tell you how many doors were opened for me based upon the the work that my mother and father had done in the education space prior to me being, a student in certain places, and people made room for me to do things because I was Emily and Kevin's son. You know what I mean? So I want to leave that same kind of room for. I want people to be like, you know what, Olivier, Henry, come do this because I know your daddy. You know, I knew your father. You know what I mean? So I want that to be my legacy with them.
No, that's beautiful, man. I love to hear that. That's a quote out there that's similar to that. I can't think of exactly what it is, but it's basically saying like people don't care about, maybe like what you've done. That basically people just care about how you made them feel. They always remember how you made them feel. And I think that's what you're alluding to is like, you want your legacy to be like, hey, Ruben was a great man. And I think that's super important. And I'm excited to kind of continue to watch your journey as an artist and as a father and how your kids are being raised with that mindset and just thinking about kind of a little bit taking it back to your childhood versus who you are today. Were there any like childhood traumas that you kind of had to overcome to get to where you at right now? Like, growing up in a small town, was there anything that like, just kind of, lingered on throughout your adulthood that you had to overcome to become the man and father you are today?
Listen, man. No. And I'm going to say this because I had very hands-on parents, man. Um, my mother and father were very, very instrumental in making me a very well-rounded and individual, and they were always there. And that's one thing I like about my wife, Kristen, is that she reminds me so much of my mom in that hovering kind of making sure everything is going the way it's supposed to go with your kid kind of situation. She's a lot like that. And I know he's gonna, no matter where I am in the road in the world, I know he's gonna be protected because he's gonna there both of them, Olivier and Henry, are gonna be like fine because she's there. But my parents, man, like I remember uh always wanting to go and do stuff without here's a good dad story. My dad worked uh, on the railroad. Okay, he worked for Norfolk Southern Railroad Company. And after he would get off work, he would go and teach auto body at another at a high school. He was the auto body teacher. And I remember when I was in middle school, there was a camping trip, right, where everybody was going camping, but uh, there was room for fathers to volunteer to go with and I for some reason I didn't want my dad to go with me. Like for some reason, like maybe I was just in that preteen stage where I was like, I don't know. I'm like, but now looking back on it, man, like it was like because I went to a predominantly white. Most of my schools at the time were predominantly white. So I mean, like for my father to say, like, I'm going with you to make sure that this is a safe space for you, um, was one of the because he definitely could have used the time off to go to bed, and he took his 3 days. Like I'm getting even teared up now thinking about it. He took his 3 days off to go camping with me with a bunch of kids, like as a chaperone, when he probably could have used the sleep,
Yeah.
and that, no amount of money can replace those kinds of experiences and I learned a lot about my dad I didn't know my dad could pitch tents and build fires. I mean, because he was in the army, but it never equates.
Right.
Those skill sets never equate because we live in a new age society where there's nothing that you don't have to do that kind of stuff. We're not. Well, my dad and I did. We went fishing a lot, but we're not hunters. We like to fish, and so we never, had the opportunity to build fires and all that stuff, and to watch him, and not just with me, but with all the other kids and like other. And I remember everybody being like, "Man, your dad is so cool," and I, And I was so funny. I remember coming home and calling my brother on the phone and was like, man, everybody was like, Dad, cool. And meanwhile, me and my brother, I was like, man, here go Dad again. Like,
No, that's funny to hear, man, because to him, I mean, to you, he was just dad, right? Like, you kind of just viewed him as dad, but getting to see him in that space and see other people, saying that he was cool, kind of just made it make more sense. And I love that story, man. And even to that
also,
point,
you know what we don't, and also, you know what we don't understand either is that other people don't have dads.
yeah,
So, like, they're seeing a dad a lot of times was a cool thing because, you
yeah.
take for granted that everybody's household situation is exactly like yours.
Yeah. No, for example, man, to that point, like I grew up and like I said, in St. Louis, Missouri,
Mhm.
and in a small area, a black community, not a lot of my friends or people that I like play basketball with had dads in their lives. And I can distinctly remember the people who did. Isn't that crazy? Like I can remember like, oh, these two people, their dads used to come to the game. But like everybody else, I don't really remember seeing their
Right.
dads. That's just my perspective. So for you, your perspective was like, my dad's always around. Like, oh, I don't know what y'all talking about. So it's just kind of crazy how things can just, be different from all of our point of views, man. And even to that point, we like to do something here at Dear Fathers where it's like a hypothetical letter.
Okay.
So if you could write a letter to your father, starting with Dear Father, what would you say to him?
I'm gonna start off as I'm gonna say, Dear Daddy, because that's what I call my father. Dear Daddy, I thank you for the sacrifices that I could not see that you were making for me on a daily basis. I thank you for being an example of leadership, of devotion, and kindness to me as a child. I thank you for encouraging me in my gifts and always being there to support me no matter what. I never had to wonder if you were going to be at a baseball game, a football game, or a performance. And for that, Dad, I am truly thankful. I love you and I am forever grateful for you.
No, I love that, man. Thank you for sharing that letter. It's always important for us to kind of tell those stories and write those hypothetical letters to our father. So I appreciate you for sharing. And is your father still with us today?
See you.
Okay. You guys still, kind of best friends, bond, talk all the time?
Absolutely, man. My dad he is a joker, and it's so funny when the relationship kind of shifts from dad son to friend. Like our conversations are completely different than they were when I was in high school and college. You know what I mean? Like my dad was like, "Hey man, you up there wasting our money?" Kind of, you know what I mean? Kind of conversations, and it shifted. Um, I think when I got my first apartment, and I remember him. It was something that I couldn't pay for or do, and he was like, "Hey man, you're an adult now. You got to sit down and figure that out. It's not for me to figure this out for you." And that has, that has stuck with me, to this day. Like I have a hard time asking for help sometimes because my dad made me like he's like, you got to be self-sufficient. You out here, like nobody is gonna like me and your mama ain't gonna always be here, even though they have always been here. But
Parents are always going to be parents at the end of the day, no matter how old you are, man. So I love to hear that, man. I appreciate, everything you've been able to share with us today. Before we get out of here, tell the people what's next for you, what you got coming up, how people can follow you.
give me 1 second. I don't want my computer to die on me. I don't got it plugged up. Okay, hold on. Give me 1 second. I thought I had charged it all the way up before I got on with you. But these Zoom calls be draining these Mac.
Yeah. Right, they do. Yeah, but no, again, I appreciate you. Let the people know, like, what's coming up next for Ruben Studdard and how they can, follow you, get in touch with you, or just kind of, if you got shows coming up, let the people know what's next for you.
So I'm on Instagram, Facebook. Um, I think I'm on TikTok. I don't know. I do know I'm on Instagram and Facebook. Real Ruben Studdard and Ruben Studdard on Facebook. Um, RubenStuddard.com and and RubenSingsLuther.com is because that show is its own entity, so you can find out the tour dates coming up with that. But yeah, my album is out now, so go to iTunes, stream it, whatever y'all do these days. I know y'all ain't buying no album, so just listen to it, run them numbers up for your boy, and then also I'll be going back on tour. I think in the fall, early fall, late summer. So like be on the lookout for those dates. And then I'm going to be working on a Christmas project. So that is what I'm doing right now. I can't believe it's been 20 years and I've never released a Christmas album. So I am feverishly working on that, trying to make sure that happens this year. So be on the lookout for that holiday project.
No, that's great, man. I appreciate you for tapping in with us, man, and all the gems and all the just insight into who you are as a Black man, as a father, from your upbringing to who you are today, and just, everything, man. I appreciate you, and I appreciate all the listeners for tapping into another episode of the Dear Fathers podcast. Be sure to subscribe and like on YouTube, as well as stream anywhere you get your podcasts, and also follow us on Instagram at Dear Fathers to stay tapped in on new episodes, and we'll definitely stay tapped in with you, Ruben. We appreciate you for joining us today.
And God bless you. Thank y'all for thinking enough of me to invite me on. I appreciate that.
No problem, man.